He looked me in the eyes as if asking for the salt at the table. "There's no place for you here." I smiled, nodded, and left without a word. What he didn't know, the next morning I would begin the process that would take the house out of his hands, because almost half of it was mine. My name is Linda Miller. I'm 71 years old. You'll see how my own son tried to throw me out of the house I helped pay for, and how a single signature turned his life upside down. It all started in March 2024, when I handed over $180,000 from my late husband, John's pension to my son, Jason Miller. He had married Megan, and they were looking for a 4-bedroom house on the outskirts of Austin, Texas. The bank didn't approve the full financing. I stepped in to complete the amount. "You'll always have a room with us," Megan said, hugging me with a catalog smile. Jason swore I'd never lift a heavy box again. The new house, at 124 Gray Park Drive, Round Rock, was modern and cold. My room was the guest room on the ground floor, a double bed, a tiny bathroom without a shower. I stayed silent. In the first days, Jason made coffee and Megan showed me how to use the digital thermostat. We had dinner together once, but soon the microstains began. Jokes on speakerphone, 2 kids and a granny. The lock on the freezer, "It's my diet." The router locked in the office, network security. Until, on April 14th, 2024, I overheard from the hallway. "She won't leave if we keep being nice. We need her to want to leave." Jason. "Discomfort works. No fight." Megan. I squeezed John's photo in its frame and went down to cook Jason's favorite chicken. Nobody showed up. The next day, I packed my suitcase. I grabbed the red folder, warranty deed with my name as co-owner, 49%. I called an Uber to a simple motel on the I-35. In my pocket, the weight of the folder, and one feeling: tomorrow, I'll be the one to slam the door. The Longhorn Motel, off the I-35, had worn carpet, the smell of old grease, and a lamp that flickered with every gust of wind. I paid 3 nights in cash, asked them not to send housekeeping. I wanted silence. I wanted to disappear. I sat on the hard bed with the red folder pressed to my chest. The distant highway noise lulled my thoughts. The next morning, April 17th, 2024, at 9:32 a.m., my phone rang with a local number. I hesitated before answering. "Mrs. Miller, this is Bernard Collins from Lone Star Community Bank. You are listed as co-owner of the property at 124 Gray Park Drive." My heart raced, but I kept my voice calm. "Yes." "What happened?" He cleared his throat. "Your son, Jason Miller, tied the house to a business line of credit for Miller Digital Marketing, LLC. Payments have been overdue since February. We sent 3 collection notices. The case is now in pre-foreclosure. A notice of default has been filed with the county." I grabbed paper and pen. Bernard explained I had 3 options: pay off the debt immediately, taking on everything; allow foreclosure, which would lead to auction; authorize a voluntary sale, giving up my share. I asked him to send everything by official email. I went down to the motel reception, printed the 14 pages on the old printer, and sat at the Formica table beside the soda machine. I took out the same blue pen I had used to sign Jason's first school forms and signed the authorization to proceed with foreclosure. At 11:08 a.m., Bernard called back confirming receipt. "The notice of default is active, Mrs. Miller. The next step is the notice of trustees sale, scheduled within 30 days. I hung up slowly. I didn't cry, didn't call anyone, didn't tell relatives. I grabbed the instant coffee from the lobby and went back to the room. In the cheap notebook I had bought at the pharmacy, I wrote in large letters, "Today I chose clarity." At 4:15 p.m, I received another email, the bank's confirmation, attaching the official document. And there was the sentence that would change the course of everything. Trustees sale scheduled for May 17th, 2024, at 10 a.m., steps of the Williamson County Courthouse. It didn't take long for the news to escape the papers. 2 days later, the neighborhood group on Facebook, Round Rock Neighbors, was already talking about the notice taped to the front door. Notice of default, late payment. I didn't need to be there. All I had to do was open the app. Megan was the first to post. "Friends, we are going through a family betrayal. If anyone knows foreclosure attorneys, please message me." The text came with a photo of the door with the crumpled paper, the word default highlighted. Jason wasn't far behind. He took an old photo of us, him at 5 years old, sitting on the curb eating ice cream, and wrote in the caption, "It hurts when the one who raised you turns their back." He didn't mention names, but everyone who knew our story understood the message. It was pure manipulation. My phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from cousins, church members, neighborhood acquaintances. "Linda, what happened?" I didn't reply. At 10:12 a.m., that same day, I got an unexpected call. Reverend Blake, pastor of the church I had attended for over 20 years. "Linda, I'm confused. People are saying serious things. Are you okay? Do you need to talk?" I closed my eyes, took a deep breath. "Not yet, Reverend, but soon. I'll send documents." And that's what I did. That afternoon, I prepared a simple email with no comments, no venting. I just attached 4 files, the warranty deed, with my name registered as 49% co-owner, proof of the $180,000 bank transfer made in March 2024, directly from my account to Jason's account. The email from Lone Star Bank confirming the notice of default. The printed copy of the notification with date and county clerk's signature. I clicked send and closed the laptop. I didn't write anything besides the subject line. Facts. That night, the church group went silent. No attacks, no public defenses, but I knew. They had read, they had seen, the truth had been planted. The next morning, April 20th, 2024, at 1 p.m., a new email arrived from the bank. This time, more direct, no frills. Trustees' sale confirmed for May 17, 2024, at 10 a.m. Williamson County Courthouse steps. It was official. They were going to lose the house, and for the first time, the silence didn't weigh only in my heart. It was on paper, stamped, and with a defined deadline. The day arrived, May 17, 2024. The Texas sun beat down hard, reflecting off the pale facade of the Williamson County Courthouse in Round Rock. At 9:47 a.m., I was already standing across the street, holding the red folder against my body as if it were a shield. I hadn't come to put on a show, nor to savor revenge. I came to see with my own eyes what Jason always swore would never happen, the consequence of his own choices. The square in front of the courthouse was busy. Birds nested in the branches of the trees, water vendors shouted their offers, and dark-suited lawyers hurried past, balancing stacks of papers. Mixed into it all, a small group of local investors approached with clipboards in hand, jotting down numbers, whispering to each other as if they were at just another marketplace. For them, this sale wasn't tragedy, it was opportunity. At exactly 10 a.m., the auctioneer appointed by the trustee climbed the steps and began the formal reading of the Notice of Trustees' sale. His voice echoed against the stone walls, blending with the traffic noise from University Boulevard. A reporter from the Hill Country Weekly raised his phone to record. A few people from the community, curious, came closer just to watch, as if they were seeing a movie scene play out live. And then I saw them arriving. Jason, cap and hood pulled down to his eyebrows, eyes sunken from sleepless nights. Megan, beside him, wiping stubborn tears with the sleeve of her light coat. The contrast between the staged performance they had built online, videos carefully edited to make them look like victims, and that real scene in front of strangers hit me like a silent punch. The auction was quick. The house, appraised at more than $500,000, went for far less, taken by a cold investor who barely looked back after the final bid. In less than 20 minutes, Everything was decided. The deed would officially pass to another owner within weeks. Jason lifted his eyes. Our gazes met for a few seconds. There was no open fury, no sincere tears, only emptiness. The emptiness of someone still expecting me to cross the street and fix the problem, as I had so many times in his life, but this time my feet stayed firmly on the ground. I noted in my notebook, 10:23 a.m., house sold. The letters shook less than I expected. As I closed the red folder, I overheard a broker murmuring softly, "If they don't leave by the date, eviction follows. It's automatic." And the buyer's lawyer added dryly, without looking at anyone, "If they resist, unlawful detainer gets filed. The judge signs fast, then the writ of possession with the constable." I saw Jason look at Megan, and Megan look at Jason. A heavy silence fell between them, as if the technical words had finally translated into law what they refused to accept. I, on my side of the street, stayed motionless, leaning against a metal post, letting each syllable fall into the air like a sentence. At 10:41 a.m., my phone buzzed. A new email from the bank, 30-day deadline for voluntary vacancy. After that, unlawful detainer filing at Justice Court. I closed the red folder, took a deep breath, and crossed the street toward the bus stop. The sound of the auctioneer's gavel still echoed in my mind like a distant thunderclap. The auction had been quick, but the process didn't end there. The American justice system works like a river, full of deadlines, forms, signatures, and I followed each step as if watching the current move toward its inevitable course. On May 27, 2024, the buyer's attorney filed an unlawful detainer action at Justice Court, Precinct 1. 3 days later, Jason and Megan received the notice in person, standing at the door now stripped of curtains, the paper stamped with the official seal. They still had the right to contest, but there was no argument. The overdue payments, the hidden loan, the notice of default, the confirmed auction sale, it was all in the county records, line by line. On June 10, 2024, the judge signed the writ of possession. The document set enforcement for June 14 at 9 a.m., with the constable assigned to carry out the order. It was a cold text, without emotion, but to me each paragraph read like the epitaph of a life they themselves had destroyed. I didn't need to be there. I had already said goodbye to that house the very moment I signed the foreclosure authorization weeks earlier, sitting on the hard motel bed. But at 10:42 a.m., that Friday, while sipping weak coffee from a styrofoam cup, my phone rang with a new voicemail. The voice was low, but loaded with guilt disguised as accusation. "I don't know what you did, but they kicked us out. It's over. You destroyed us, Mom. I hope you're happy, Jason." Every word sounded rehearsed, as if he had practiced it in front of a mirror. There was no remorse, only accusation, as if I had pressed a destruction button instead of simply letting justice take its natural course. Shortly after, at 12:08 p.m., came a text message from Megan, typed in haste, not even checking the mistakes. "If your goal was to hurt us, congratulations, you destroyed your family." The word family flashed on the screen like an insult. To them, family meant convenience. I was useful while I transferred money, while I washed towels, while I stayed silent at dinners where I was never really heard. But the instant I stopped being convenient, I also stopped being family. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and pulled out the notebook that now followed me like a diary. I wrote in firm letters so I wouldn't forget. June 14th, 2024. They lost the house. I did not lose myself. I stared at the sentence until the letters almost disappeared before my tired eyes. It was then that I realized silence could be more powerful than any response. At 6:20 p.m., the phone buzzed again. An email from the Hill Country Weekly reporter. "Mrs. Miller, we'd like to interview you. Your side matters. Can we schedule?" I looked at the screen for a few seconds, the cursor blinking in the reply box. Finally, I typed just 2 words: "Not yet." I clicked send and closed the laptop. I knew it wasn't the time yet, but that time would come. On the morning of June 17th, 2024, there was a knock on the motel room door. The sound wasn't aggressive, nor hurried. It was firm, polite, with the cadence of someone used to waiting. I stayed still for a few seconds, my heart racing, as always when someone knocked. I had learned to take 3 breaths before opening, as if that small ritual could protect my body and my calm. On the other side was a middle-aged woman. Her hair was tied back in a simple bun, a few white strands escaping. She wore a worn but clean blazer, and her posture was straight, almost military. Her eyes, however, weren't hard. They carried firmness and gentleness at the same time. "Mrs. Miller? My name is Doris Alvarez. I work in the Housing Services Department of the City of Austin." I stayed silent for a few seconds, not understanding what a city employee could want with me. My mind immediately jumped to bills, lawsuits, more paperwork. But she carried no folders, only a small bag and an attentive expression. "I saw some comments online," she continued, her voice calm. "And before a narrative was set without your voice, I thought I should hear your version. Can we talk?" We went down to the motel lobby. The air conditioner was too loud, blowing cold air that didn't cool anything. The coffee from the machine was lukewarm and watery, served in styrofoam cups that seemed to melt at the touch. Even so, her presence brought an unexpected calm, as if suddenly there was someone in the room who didn't see me as a burden or an accused person. I told her everything: the $180,000 transfer in March, the deed signed with Jason's name next to mine, the commercial loan he had hidden, the small daily humiliations, the lock on the freezer, the router taken away, the dinners where I wasn't invited, and finally, the eviction carried out by the constable in front of the neighbors. Doris didn't pull out a pen, didn't open a notebook. She just listened with silent attention. When I finished, she took a deep breath and said, "I'm not a reporter, Mrs. Miller. I'm tired of seeing good people crushed by well-edited narratives on social media. This isn't about fame. It's about shelter and dignity." As she stood up, she pulled a simple card from her pocket with the city's logo in blue. "If you decide you need something stable, come find me. I know the paths." I went back to the room with the card in my hands. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at those printed letters, as if they were the first proof in weeks that there were still people willing to listen before judging. Night fell slowly. The neon sign outside flickered intermittently, and I, for the first time in a long while, felt that someone believed me without needing me to shove evidence in their face. Later, I opened the email from the Hill Country Weekly reporter, still marked as unread. The subject: "Your side matters." I forwarded it to myself with a new subject: "Don't forget." I closed the laptop, promising myself that the right time would come. The next morning, I sat down with instant coffee. The bitter taste clung to my mouth. But before I even finished the cup, a notification appeared on my phone. TikTok, video from Megan Miller. Curious, I opened it. There was Megan in front of a moving truck, mascara streaked down her cheeks, pregnant belly visible. She held a cardboard sign with bold letters, "My mother-in-law kicked us out of our home." The video had already surpassed 80,000 views in 2 days. I watched Megan's entire TikTok video. The camera shook just enough to look amateur. The wrinkled cardboard gave the impression of improvisation, and the smudged makeup completed the perfect performance. Her pregnant belly on display did the rest. It won instant empathetic comments. "Some parents want to control their kids forever. You're strong, Megan. Boundaries are necessary. Don't let toxic people manipulate you, even if it's your mother." The phrases popped up on the screen like applause from an invisible audience. For any unsuspecting viewer, it was impossible not to feel sorry for her. But I knew. None of it was spontaneous. It was performance, carefully rehearsed. I closed the app, sat on the hard motel bed, and pulled out the red folder. I spread the documents across the bedspread like someone assembling a puzzle. The warranty deed, showing my name as co-owner. The proof of the $180,000 transfer made in March. The notice of default issued by the bank. The official letter confirming the auction date. And finally, the screenshots of Megan's messages, laughing and typing, "Once she's out, we can plan the baby's room." I stared at that mosaic of evidence. It was cold, impersonal, but at the same time more truthful than any tear on video. I didn't add a caption, didn't vent. I simply scanned each document, selected them all, and sent them in a single email to 3 recipients: Reverend Blake, my cousins in Dallas, and the church women's group that had accompanied me for years. In the subject line, I wrote only one word: facts. 5 minutes later, the first reply came. Short, dry. They lied to everyone. After that, silence. No public defense, no immediate comment. But I knew. The rope had snapped. Those who needed to see, saw. Those who needed to understand, understood. At 9:17 p.m. on June 20th, 2024, my phone buzzed again. A short message from Jason. "I just want to talk." 10 minutes later, another. "I know it got ugly, but you're still my mom." I stared at the screen for far too long. In other times, those words would have melted my heart. I would have rushed to reply, erased the pain with a conciliatory phrase. But now, they sounded like a cheap trick. Like a hook cast into murky waters, waiting for me to bite. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and placed the phone in the nightstand drawer. I shut it firmly, like someone closing a chapter. The room sank back into silence, and for the first time I realized that this silence wasn't emptiness. It was choice. 2 days later, June 22nd, 2024, at 2 p.m., I heard 3 light knocks on the motel room door. The dry sound reverberated through the thin walls, like a reminder that fragile doors cannot hold back heavy intentions. For a few seconds, I thought about not opening. I held my breath, glanced at the red folder on the corner table as if it could give me courage. Then I slowly approached, pressed my eye to the peephole, and saw Jason's worn-out face, unshaven beard, deep dark circles, shoulders slumped as if he had aged 10 years in just a few weeks. Against my own instinct, I turned the lock and left only a crack. 5 minutes, I said coldly. He walked in slowly, measuring his steps like someone asking permission in enemy territory. The worn carpet creaked under his shoes. We sat face to face at a round table near the window. The thin curtain let in a yellowish light, illuminating the black folder he carried as if it were treasure. I could smell sweat mixed with stale coffee. For an instant, I almost saw the boy who once sought my lap when he had a fever, but the illusion dissolved the moment he opened his mouth. "Mom, I ruined everything," he began, his voice low, almost a whisper. I shouldn't have let Megan talk that way. I was panicked, the business failing, the bank calling. I stayed silent. I had learned that sometimes silence pulls out more truths than any question. He opened the folder and slid a document across the table. "It's nothing major, just a limited authorization to make things easier with the bank. Sign here and everything will be resolved." I picked up the paper, the rough texture, the notary's seal, the staple hurriedly placed. I read it once, then again. At first glance, it looked routine, technical paragraphs about administrative access. But between the lines, hidden in jargon, was the trap. Broad clauses granting him unrestricted powers, equivalent to a full power of attorney, the right to access my accounts, including my retirement. I lifted my eyes. Jason wasn't looking at the document. He was looking at me, expecting me to give in, as I had so many times before. "Show me where you think it's limited," I asked. He pointed at some random paragraph. I shook my head. "It's not limited. It's a trick." I pushed the paper back across the table, firmly. Leave. He blinked, as if he hadn't understood. Mom. I said, get out. Jason rose slowly, like someone saving a last card up his sleeve. He went to the window, took a deep breath, his shoulders sagging in a theater of remorse. Then he let out the calculated phrase, "We're losing the baby's future, Mom. That's what this is about." For a moment, I saw flashes of the boy who trembled when he broke a glass in the kitchen and ran to me to apologize. But that boy no longer existed. In front of me was a man willing to use even his own child's innocence as currency for manipulation. "That future you've already lost," I replied, without trembling. He didn't argue. He tucked the folder away with a slow motion and left in silence, letting the door close softly behind him. I stayed still, hand on the table, my whole body trembling, not with fear, but with the release of years of broken expectations. The silence of the room felt louder than any scream. I walked to the reception phone and spoke calmly, my voice firm as stone. "I want to change rooms, another floor, another hallway, if possible." The next morning, June 23, 2024, I packed my bags in silence. There wasn't much, a few folded clothes, John's photo in the cracked frame, the red folder always close to my body. I went down to the reception desk of the Longhorn Motel and asked to change rooms. Another floor, another hallway, anywhere far from this one. The clerk just nodded, as if she had heard that request dozens of times before. In 15 minutes, I was already settled in a new room, overlooking the empty parking lot. The air was the same, but to me it meant something else: protection. I closed the curtains, turned on the electric kettle, and sat watching the steam rise, thinking about how many years I had spent believing I could fix everything for Jason. Now, every decision was a trench. That same day, I pulled out the business card Doris Alvarez from the City of Austin Housing Services had given me. I called. Her steady voice answered almost immediately. "Mrs. Miller, so good to hear from you. Are you ready to talk?" "I am. Not just to leave that house, but to move on." I went to the Housing Services building that Monday afternoon. Doris welcomed me with the same calm as always. She pulled a folder from the drawer and slid it toward me. Coastal housing options for retirees. The first page showed a simple apartment in Rockport, Texas. 1 bedroom, plus a small office. Balcony with a partial view of the Gulf of Mexico, grocery store a few blocks away. Rent compatible with my retirement income. The photo of the balcony showed sunlight pouring through the windows, uninvited. "This one," I said, marking it with a red pen. Doris just nodded. "We'll start the process. In a few weeks, you'll have a real home." Back at the motel, I opened my email. Among the messages, one in particular stood out: Megan Miller, no emojis, no flourishes, just raw text. "We don't know what we're going to do now. We have nothing. I know you hate me, but think of the baby." I stared at those lines like looking into an empty glass. I closed the laptop without replying. I made a cup of mint tea and sat in the motel parking lot, watching the sunset disappear behind the building in front. For the first time, I felt the weight was no longer mine. The next morning, June 24, 2024, at 9:10 a.m., I entered the local courthouse and filed a request for a protective order, no contact, against Jason and Megan. I submitted copies of the messages, the attempted legal scam, even a screenshot of the designer diaper bag Megan flaunted as a gift. I received the case number in hand. I tucked the paper into the red folder. I knew this wasn't the end of the war, but it was the first official shield I had raised in years. It was Sunday, 7:40 p.m., when I heard light knocks on the door of my room. The hallway was silent. Only the hum of the air conditioner broke the emptiness. I peeked through the peephole. Megan, messy hair, smudged makeup, eyes red as if she had been crying all afternoon. In her arms, a baby wrapped in a pink blanket. On her shoulder, A designer diaper bag, the tag still dangling from the zipper. I hesitated before opening. "Please, I don't want to fight," she said, almost whispering. "Jason is destroyed. We were denied another rental. We failed the credit check. Can I come in just for a minute?" I opened a few inches, enough to see her better. The baby whimpered softly, more discomfort than pain. Megan stepped in slowly, as if walking through a minefield. She sat on the edge of the bed, rocking the child in her arms. "Her name is Emilia," she murmured. "She's yours too. Don't leave us on the street." The words fell like stones on my chest, but what caught my attention wasn't the plea. It was the bag, far too expensive for someone claiming to have nothing. A baby bee, catalog price over $900. I looked out the window. Down below, a rented black SUV gleamed under the streetlight, not the car of someone desperate. I crossed my arms. "Did you come here to ask for help, or to record something?" Megan froze. I quickly glanced at the side of the bag. The reflection of a phone screen flickered against the fabric. "We just wanted proof," she admitted, her voice almost inaudible. "In case you twisted the story." My blood boiled, but my voice came out calm. I pointed to the door. "Take your gift and leave my room now." She hesitated, clutched the baby tighter against her chest. "She's your granddaughter." I held her gaze steady. "No, she's your daughter, and she deserves to be raised better than how you treat people." Megan stood up slowly, still holding the baby. She walked to the door without another word, the silence broken only by the baby's soft cry. She stepped into the hallway, got into the SUV, and drove off within seconds. I closed the door, locked it twice, and sat on the bed, breathing deeply until my hands stopped trembling. I grabbed the notebook and wrote, "They brought a baby to manufacture pity. I brought evidence." The next morning, I went to the courthouse and added everything to the protective order case. Screenshots of the messages, the fraudulent power of attorney attempt, Megan's visit with hidden recording, even the photo of the diaper bag model. The clerk just shook his head, as if he'd seen stories like this many times before. "You're not the first, and you won't be the last." I went back to the motel with a copy of the filing in hand, and for the first time, I felt I was prepared for the next strike. 2 days after Megan's visit, I sat down in front of the motel's old laptop. The screen took its time to light up, as if it too were tired of my story, but when it finally did, I already knew what I would do. I clicked on New Email and typed the address of the Hill Country Weekly reporter who had reached out weeks earlier. In the subject line, I wrote only, "It's not revenge, it's clarity." I attached the documents in chronological order, as if assembling an undeniable timeline. The warranty deed, with my name registered as co-owner. The proof of the $180,000 transfer made in March. The notice of default issued by the bank, listing the months of delay. The letter confirming the date of the trustee's sale. Screenshots of Megan's conversations. Typing without shame. Once she's out, we can plan the baby's room. The TikTok video where they accused me publicly, molding themselves into perfect victims. The photo of the baby bee bag, still with the tag, next to the catalog price, proof that their display of misery was nothing but theater. I didn't write a narrative, didn't try to dramatize. I simply let the evidence speak for itself. In the body of the email, I typed a single sentence. "If you want my version, here it is." On the morning of June 30th, 2024, the article was published. 3 full pages, with a firm headline, "When Help Becomes a Weapon, the Story of a Mother Against Financial Manipulation." It wasn't sensationalist. It didn't appeal to easy tears. It was direct. It explained the loan, the foreclosure, the eviction. It showed that I hadn't thrown anyone out, but had simply allowed justice to carry out what was already written in the records. The article didn't go viral immediately, but something shifted. The neighborhood group stopped sharing Megan's videos. At church, The silence that once carried judgment gave way to restrained looks of respect. No one applauded me, but no one repeated their narrative either. It was as if, finally, I had regained the basic right to be heard. My name, which for weeks had been dragged through digital mud, was beginning to be seen again as a person's name, not a villain's. That same afternoon, I walked to a small cafe in downtown Round Rock. I ordered an iced tea and sat by the window. The murmur of light conversations mixed with the sound of the ice machine. For a moment, I almost forgot the tension that had followed me like a shadow. Then I saw him. Jason. Alone. At a table in the corner. Hood pulled down to his eyebrows, eyes fixed on the cup in front of him. He wasn't on his phone, wasn't reading anything, just staring at the coffee as if searching for answers there. For an instant, I thought of leaving without being seen. The maternal instinct almost pushed me to cross the room, to take his hand and tell him everything could still be fixed. But before I could make any decision, he lifted his eyes. Our gazes met. There were no words, no gestures, only a silent recognition. Two worlds divided by an invisible line that would never again be crossed. I paid my bill, stood slowly, and left through the side door. My heart pounded, but my mind was calm. For the first time, I felt I no longer needed to chase after explanations. At the cafe, the seconds when my eyes met Jason's felt like an eternity. He didn't smile, didn't wave, didn't show remorse. He only stared at me with that empty look, a mix of accusation and expectation, as if I were supposed to cross the room to offer forgiveness without him ever having to ask. But I didn't move. I held my bag tightly against my chest, paid the bill, and left through the side door. The hot June air hit my face like a dry punch. I took a deep breath and walked to the bus stop, feeling that the silence already said everything that needed to be said. That night, back in the motel room, I turned on the electric kettle and sat on the bed with the laptop on my lap. The screen lit up the dark space, revealing every mark on the worn carpet. Among the accumulated notifications, there was a subjectless email from Jason's address. I opened it. The first message read, "I read the article. I won't contact you again. I'm sorry you think you had no other choice." Right below, another line, sent a few minutes later. "I don't regret what I did. I'm sorry it came to this." I read it once. I didn't reread it. I archived the messages and closed the laptop. There was nothing there that called for a reply. They were words scattered like breadcrumbs on the ground, waiting for me to chase after them again. But I didn't chase. I simply turned off the light and let silence fill the room. The next morning, July 1st, 2024, the motel manager knocked on my door with a stack of redirected mail. There were old bills, church flyers, insurance letters. In the middle, an envelope with the Rockport real estate letterhead. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside, a short note, handwritten in firm script. "You've been approved. The keys are waiting. Doris." I held the paper for long minutes, as if those 3 sentences carried more weight than any judge's signature. Approved. A practical, bureaucratic, administrative word, but one that sounded like absolution. As if someone had finally looked at me and said, "You have the right to exist here." I opened the packet of documents. The contract listed the new address, Harbor View Apartments, Rockport, TX, Unit 204. 2 small bedrooms, side balcony with partial sea view, rent compatible with my monthly retirement income. The move-in date was set, July 12th, 2024. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. After months of humiliation, silence, and isolation, there was finally a place waiting for me. A place that didn't depend on Jason or Megan. A space that would be mine alone. That night, lying on the motel's rough bed, I thought about the word Doris had used in the note. Approved. I felt it echo inside me like a key opening an invisible door. And for the first time in a long while, I fell asleep without fear of being expelled again. On July 12, 2024, I woke up earlier than usual. I packed my things for the last time in the motel room, clothes folded in silence, the red folder carefully tucked at the bottom of the suitcase, John's photo in the cracked frame wrapped in a towel so it wouldn't break. The taxi arrived at 9 a.m. sharp. I placed the suitcases in the trunk and looked one last time at the door of room 214. I didn't feel nostalgia, only relief. The trip to Rockport took a little over 3 hours. On the way, the horizon seemed to open wider with every mile, as if the road itself was pushing me toward a new life. When the car turned onto the street of Harborview Apartments, I realized the name was fitting. The simple, 2-story white-painted buildings reflected the light of the sea in the distance. Apartment 204 was smaller than I had imagined, but full of brightness. The balcony faced the parking lot, but if I closed my eyes, I could hear the deep, steady sound of the Gulf of Mexico. I set the suitcases on the floor and stood at the doorway for nearly a minute, not out of fear, but because I wanted to feel the silence embrace me. I unwrapped John's photo first. I placed it on the living room table, next to the red folder. Then I made tea in the old kettle already in the apartment, one of those stainless steel ones with a loose handle. I waited for the water to boil, poured it into a mug, and went out to the balcony. The wind carried the smell of salt and seaweed. I couldn't see the ocean from there, but I could feel it. In the following days, I reorganized my life in small details. I filled the fridge with what I really liked: vanilla yogurt, green grapes, dark bread, strong cheese. I bought 2 plants at a corner market. One of them didn't have a name yet. I began walking in the mornings to the harbor. The sky shifted between gray and blue, but the silence was always the same. No one recognized me. No one asked questions. With every step, I felt the word family lose its weight of accusation and become a choice. That Thursday afternoon, I stepped into a small seafood restaurant near the pier. On the sidewalk, a woman my age was painting seashells at a folding table. She smiled without insistence and said, "Choose one that calls to you." My eyes passed over the shells until I found a blue one with silver edges and thin lines like veins. I picked it up and felt the cool texture in my palm. "Good choice," she said. "That one's for someone who just set down a burden." I went home and placed the shell on the kitchen counter, next to the keys. I gave it a name: Peace. But when the phone rang that night, breaking the silence I had just discovered, I realized not every weight had been left behind. That night, as I looked at the blue shell on the counter, I realized it wasn't just decoration. It was a symbol, a reminder that I had left behind not just a house, but the weight of being treated as a burden. The shell found a permanent place beside the keys, like a talisman reminding me, now, this space is yours. 2 days later, I walked to Rockport's community center. I saw a flyer taped to the glass: art class for retirees, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 3 p.m. I felt an unexpected impulse. I walked in and signed up. At the first class, I met the teacher, Walter Brooks, about 70, wide suspenders, glasses slipping down his nose. He told bad jokes nobody really laughed at, but everyone waited for the next one anyway. He had that air of someone who no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. He walked among the tables looking at our drawings. When he reached mine, he paused for a few seconds. "You draw like someone who's carried heavy things." I smiled without answering. He didn't press, he just moved on, like someone who respects silence. That evening, I went home with a sketchbook under my arm. I drew the blue shell, trying to reproduce the silver lines that seemed to shift as the light struck them. It didn't come out perfect, but it didn't matter. For the first time in a long while, I was creating something just for myself. The following days found a rhythm: morning walks, art class twice a week, tea on the balcony at sunset. Each routine seemed to clear away a little of the dust Jason and Megan had tried to leave on me. Until, one Tuesday, I found a plain envelope in the mailbox, handwritten, shaky script, no return address, only the postmark of a P.O.I. box near Austin. I held the envelope for a few seconds, already guessing where it came from. I brought it inside, sat at the table, and opened it slowly. Inside was just a single sheet of paper, folded into 3. 4 short lines written with effort. I know I can't undo what I did. I don't expect anything from you. I just want you to know I'm trying. I named her Amelia Linda Miller. I folded the paper carefully, like someone closing a chapter with their own hands. I held that folded letter for long minutes, as if each line had been written with the intent to cut me and, at the same time, to stitch me back together. I read it once. Then again. The words didn't burn, didn't tighten my chest as I had imagined. They just rested there, raw, almost indifferent. I named her Amelia Linda Miller. It was strange to see my name, which had so often been used as a weight, now carried by a baby I barely knew. A baby who was not to blame for anything, but who was already born wrapped in layers of silence and manipulation. I thought of how Megan would pronounce Linda out loud, perhaps as a reminder of the woman she had tried to erase. I thought of how Jason would say that name when registering his daughter, trying to cleanse his own conscience without ever admitting guilt. I rose slowly from the table, like someone carrying something too delicate, and walked to the dresser. I opened the drawer where the warranty deed of the old house was kept. I placed the letter beside it. 2 papers. One that had imprisoned me for months, reminding me daily of betrayal. Another that, somehow, promised an unexpected kind of continuation. Neither had legal value at that moment, but both carried scars enough for a lifetime. That night, I decided to walk barefoot to the beach. The sand still held the warmth of the day, and the gray-blue sky blurred with the line of the sea. The wind carried the smell of salt, and the deep sound of the waves felt like the heartbeat of a world breathing slowly. I walked for almost an hour without direction, letting my footprints be erased by the tide with each step. I thought of Amelia, a child who had asked for none of this, a name that began small, pure, even while carrying the weight of stories she did not yet understand. I imagined her first steps, her first words, all free from the forced silence that had surrounded me for so long. I thought of Jason, the boy who once picked flowers from the neighbor's yard to give me as a gift, the teenager who trembled when I left for my night shift, the man who threw me out of the house I had helped pay for and tried to use me as a last resort when the ground collapsed beneath him. The line between those versions had never been so clear. I understood then that the boy no longer existed, and that the man was no longer my problem. Perhaps, from the shards he himself had created, he could rebuild something, but not for me, for him. I returned slowly to the apartment. I turned on only the kitchen light and leaned the blue shell against the counter. I touched its cool surface and decided I would no longer carry this weight. It wasn't my mission to save memories only I still held with affection. It wasn't my obligation to give meaning to the emptiness they themselves had created. That night, I slept whole, without interruptions, without confusing dreams, without the weight of voices echoing in the hallways of my mind. Only silence. A silence that, for the first time, wasn't emptiness. It was rest. But when I woke the next morning, the phone buzzed insistently, unknown number. The ringing filled the room like a cruel reminder. No matter how much I wanted to close chapters, some would still try to reopen themselves. I let the phone ring until it stopped. I didn't answer. The silence that followed was sweeter than any explanation I could have heard. I placed the device in the drawer, pulled the blanket over my shoulders, and closed my eyes. It was the first time in years that I had the right to choose not to respond. It wasn't escape, it was choice. In the days that followed, I immersed myself in the simple routine of the new apartment. I unpacked boxes at my own pace. I hung clothes in the closet without hurry, folding each piece as if it were an act of care toward myself. I filled the fridge not with leftovers or concessions, but with what I truly enjoyed: vanilla yogurt, dark bread, strong cheese. I wrote one line a day in the notebook that was no longer a diary of pain, but a record of rebuilding. At the community center, I kept attending the art classes. Professor Walter told the same bad jokes, and for the first time, I began to laugh at them without effort. I brought an unfinished canvas home and realized that the result didn't matter. The process itself was enough. I bought another plant for the balcony and named it Hope. The blue shell remained next to the keys, reminding me daily that peace is a quiet choice, almost invisible, but present. A few weeks later, while walking along the pier, I realized I no longer turned my head when I heard footsteps. I no longer flinched at unknown numbers flashing on my phone screen. Fear, which had once kept me chained to every detail, no longer ruled me. I took a deep breath and let the salty wind hit my face as proof that I was still here, whole. That night, I made tea and sat on the couch with a random book. The water still warm in the mug, the breeze drifting through the window, the distant sound of waves beating like a steady heart. I closed my eyes and realized something simple. I no longer had to ask permission to exist. The phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I smiled. I let it ring out, like watching an echo disappear into the bottom of a valley. And then, in a low voice, I whispered the 5 words that had followed me since the day Jason threw me out of the house I helped pay for. There's no place here either. I stood, closed the apartment door gently, and exhaled slowly. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. I felt whole. And now, I ask you, tell us where you're watching from and what you would do in Linda's place. Leave your comment and like the video. Follow the channel for more stories like this. Share it with someone who needs to hear it.